in that it's going to give the appearance of being highly detailed, and in fact it won't be. Okay, it's going to be sort of like this sort of thickness.
There's a lot of shoulder in your picture, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks for the warning, because it
Much better, thank you.
it really I don't know whether it irritates me more than the people who look at my videos, but it's so hard to get into the habit of keeping out of the way, because when you paint, you naturally want to be right in front of what you're painting, and to paint off center like that, so I'm way over here. It's like I'm seeing a slimmed down version of it because I'm so far over to the side, but it's something I've got to get used to. And of course, the more I paint, the more I get into a video. Quite often, if you've watched, I'm sure, well, I hope some of you have watched my videos. The last one I put up is embarrassing. It's this, and I'm jabbering away about what I'm doing, and all you can see is this shoulder, which is no good to anyone really. Okay, so this is how you paint a tree. A tree trunk that looks as though it's had hours spent on it. You notice that there are no straight lines. Got to have the bumps. Trees have bumps. By using the brush this way round, I can get a nice hard edge over here just by touching the brush on the board like so. And occasionally I'll show you something that I do in a painting, and that is to just do that. And that's what I call something for later. Okay. It looks as though, I'm trying. One of the things I really like to teach people is to not be afraid of making mistakes. So if I get a brush loaded up with paint here, and I turn to look at something on my desk, and I do that, you think, oh, that's terrible. That's completely, totally ruined the painting. But actually, it hasn't, because if you do this to it, and then you get some paper and you wipe it across there like so, you've got the beginnings of a background. Let's put a bit more down here. This is the thing that I tell my students, particularly when they come here. This is my permanent drawing. Whatever happens to this picture when it dries off is permanent. So forget, you don't need a pencil. This is when this is dry, you can add colours to this, and you can make it into a multicoloured, high technicolor illustration of a tree very easily, purely by putting a colour over the top. Notice all these little nuances that you get through here. You've got this sort of light channel. When you chuck the paint on and you look at it, and you have to learn to look for either the landscape in the paint or the tree in the paint, or if you were doing this for imaginary portraiture, you just look for the face that is in there and bring it out. So now if I start to enhance some of these light bits here, you know that effect you get on a tree where the bark has come off? So you've got a little bit of bark here, this dark area, and then you've got the light of the underside, under the bark, down here. It is, I hate to say it, it is ridiculously simple. The thing that causes people problems is that they don't believe how simple it is. People will start painting a picture and being incredibly careful. So when they are, I'm just going to lighten that there. When they are too careful, that's when you make mistakes. That's when the everything starts to stiffen up. So let me just explain what I'm doing here. So this because it's pale here, will recede into the background. The dark bit down the bottom here will come forward. It has to, because red and black, and this looks like black, it's actually very, very dark green. Red and black have the same colour wavelength, which means that they hit the retina before any other colours. That's why when you look at a landscape, as things recede into the background, they go blue. It's the Tyndale effect. If you paint a picture and you put some nice darks in the foreground, like this, this is now even more in front of this pale colour here. It has to be, because it hits your eye first. It has a reaction to your brain, and if you add a bit of red and brown, for instance I'm using brown, into the green, it hits the eye even faster. I hope that makes sense. I hear lots of noises coming from my computer. Just going to get a little bit more gloopy stuff here. I'm hoping that all these sounds I'm hearing are people typing questions. I've just made this a bit more gloopy. This is, now I have to say, if you're thinking of using liquid, some people don't want to use linseed oil because they're allergic to it, and I can understand that. You know, I have certain allergies to certain things. Liquid I can recommend. This is actually nice because it's very fluid, but it isn't dripping down the picture. Now if I had linseed oil on here and it was mixed with the paint to dilute it the way I'm using this stuff, this would be travelling down the picture, which you don't want, because if you do use linseed oil and you do get it too drippy, you have to work very fast and then lay the picture down so that it doesn't end up on the floor. This is good. It's got a bit of an odour, but it's bearable. I think out of the two, I think I prefer alkyd to liquid. Just going to put a little bit of light there. When you do things like this, when you start using paper, don't get into doing this, because when you do, that's all you'll get things just disappearing like so. However, having said that, I'm going to put a tone up here anyway. I think I want a little bit of a tone in the background. But if you wanted to have an effect from the paper that actually means something, it has to be literally not that bit of paper. It has to be just a touch. You can touch the picture, make your effect, and then that's the end of that little bit of paper. That little bit of paint there is no good to anyone. If I carry on using that to make my textures and my shapes, all I'll do is make mush. So find a clean bit.
Would you like to field a couple questions, Stuart?
Some questions, yes.
Yeah. So someone has asked, Denise has asked, what is the texture of the panel?
This is very smooth plywood, painted with gesso, which is a white acrylic-based primer, which I've put on. I've had three coats with a sanding between each coat, just to end up with something. You can see a bit of the wood texture, which I quite like. But if you sand it enough, you can actually get it so that it looks like almost like Formica.
Okay. So someone said Pam said she recently used MDF board. Does this absorb more moisture than plywood?
Right. MDF. Now, I've done a lot of paintings on MDF, and I don't anymore for several reasons. One is that it's very heavy. I've got a few paintings here. There's one in front of me actually, which I might try to show you when I finish painting. It's a great enormous storm cloud that I painted. There's actually a video of this with giant black, really dark cloud. Now that's on MDF, and it's about 8 or 9 millimeters thick, which is about, I suppose, 3/8 of an inch thick. and it weighs a ton. It's incredibly heavy. So that's one of the downsides. If you want to hang it on the wall, you need some serious drilling done to your wall to take the weight. The other thing is that if the MDF gets wet, that can be a serious problem because it will start to swell. You'll get big. For instance, if this got damp down the edges, you would end up with it getting thicker where it was wet. It's like if you get cardboard and you get it wet, it swells. You have that sort of effect, and you really don't want that, obviously. So plywood is what I would recommend, and it needs to be a reasonable quality plywood. You can't just use the cheap stuff. Now the only thing I can say about that is the cheap stuff is usually slightly orangey in colour. This board has a sort of well, in France they call it a blonde wood. It's the same sort of colour as this here that I'm going to show you. It's the same sort of colour as this palette, but more pale. I think that makes sense. You may wonder why I've got such a really nice wooden palette here and I never use it. Well, I like it. I like it. So I use that just as a shelf, and I just use these things. So. Now then, down here. So I hope that covers the MDF for you. Plywood is always best.
One person has asked if you can buy pre-gessoed boards.
You can. If you're really rich, go for it. If you go on the internet and you type in pre-gessoed wood panels, you'll come up with things, for some reason, I don't know why, they'll be about this big. Tiny, that sort of size. And they're very expensive. I think, well, it's obviously going to work out cheaper. This piece of board, this is 80 centimetres that way by 60 across. This cost about €7, which is around about the same, I suppose about $6 or $7, something like that, I think. So, and the gesso, you know, it comes in a container, like it's a tub. Do I have one? I don't have one in reach at the moment, but I'll show you at the end of the video. Gesso comes in a tub, costs about €16 for a tub, which is approximately that sort of size. Again, as I said, I'll show you later. And the brush that you paint it on was, you know, very, very cheap. You don't need expensive brushes at all. They cost literally just a few dollars. This is non-pretentious painting. I remember when I was a student, I always, even though money was tight back then, I remember going out and buying equipment, thinking that I had to have the best. Because, sorry, I got in the way of it there. Thinking I had to have the best of everything because the tools would make the painting, but it doesn't work that way. What makes the painting is confidence, I suppose. It's one of the main things. Prepare yourself mentally so that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, because you will. Just think back to the first time you got on a bicycle. And trust me, I've been over some handlebars in my day and had some really nasty landings. It's the same with painting. You will paint a lot of pictures that you really wish you hadn't painted, but it all adds up. You know, it's all experience. Make mistakes. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Let me see what I can do. I'm going to try and do a bit of grass and textury stuff down here at the moment. All I'm doing really with this is just filling it up with shapes. All these, the good thing about lots of good things. One of the good things about these brushes is that because they're so cheap, they are in fact a bristle and nylon mix. There's very little nylon. It's mostly bristle, but I wonder if you can actually see. Hopefully my autofocus will start to kick in there. It's not a smooth top there. It's up and down. It's slightly feathery. Lots and lots of textures going on there. Those textures at this stage allow you to do things like that. When that's dry, you can then pick out some of these shapes with a smaller brush if you really want to, and start to give what I call the illusion of detail. There is no actual detail. And I think there's a light spot. I've got a reflection there because that is actually a solid branch. I'm just going to have a little tweak of my lights here. I will. Okay. So yeah, there we go. What was I saying? Talking about yeah, frame of mind. Yeah, the equipment. The equipment is irrelevant. You should be able to paint a picture just with your hands. Now that is obviously the cheapest brush you'll ever get, and in fact I'll show you that because it's worth knowing. If you get some paint on your hand like that and you think, okay, well what do I want here? I think I'll have a branch, maybe I'll have a branch coming out here. So you should be able to actually put something on there that looks like a branch. If you believe that you can actually do it, you will. And the thing about branches is they're all bumpy and twisty and turny. Some are whip-like, but mostly when limbs on trees get to be large, they start to sort of meander around, you know, and they have little bumps on them and things like that. And of course, if you do that, you will have to wipe your hand. So I'm going to show you something that I meant to show people in the last lesson. The ways that paper can work for you. First of all, if you fold it, this is all going to be quite obvious really. If you fold it and you make it flat like that, that is good for wiping off. Okay, that takes paint off. Speaks for itself. The opposite side to that is textured. It's just the way it happens. When you do this, you end up the opposite side being textured. That's perfect for this sort of thing, for that effect, to get varying textures in your paint. I'll try and do it so that it's a bit more exaggerated. So down in this area here, if I make that really nice and bumpy, like that, and I just touch it on there, you notice it starts to make interesting shapes. The other way to use paper is in strips, and I did show this last time, I think. This is actually excellent for several things. One is for grass. That's the whipping thing, like this. Let me just see if I can zoom you in on that a little bit. I've tried to rig this up so that the camera doesn't jump about all over the place when I do things like this. Okay, so there's a little bit of a close-up. Okay, so I've locked the camera. Good. It hopefully won't fall off the tripod. So I'll do that again so you can actually see how it happens. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of grass just there. So notice that line that just appears? I hope you can anyway. I'll exaggerate it. There we are. Instant grass. None of this sitting there with a little brush trying to paint long strands of grass. Just flick it. I'll put some up. Now there's paint on here, I can put some up there. So if I just get a little bit more. Okay, which would you rather do? Grass in 10 seconds or grass in several hours? I know which one I'd choose. So I'm going to zoom back a bit again. Right.
And we have a few more questions if you'd like to answer them.
Oh yeah.
Pam had asked a follow-up about the MDF. Can you use a thinner board, like 4mm?
Yeah, well you can. Now, that's an interesting point. I bought some very thin MDF and it was about 3 or 4mm. And because I like to work at a certain size, I don't like to do anything much smaller than this. It was very whippy and quite frail. And I had the feeling that, you know, if I leant it against the wall for any length of time, first thing it would do was bow, and it did, and incredibly easy to break. Plywood is tough. This is, I mean, you know, what they use it to make boats. So by all means, MDF 4mm thick. If you're doing a painting about that big, tiny little painting, it'll be rigid enough for that sort of thing. But for anything big, you know, you've got to be careful because it will break.
Any comments on masonite?
Isn't masonite the same thing? No,
I don't know.
I always thought it was, but I'm a Brit, you see, and we either call it MDF, we have MDF or we have plywood or canvas. So masonite and MDF, I don't know. Are they the same thing? It's a mystery to me. While I'm waiting for the next question, I'm just going to show you something here about balance. Excuse me. This tree trunk starts off quite wide down here, and it goes up there, and it gets quite thin quite quickly. It's actually too quickly. If you go out and you look at a tree, something like I don't know, trying to think of a species apart from an oak tree. Well, maybe an oak tree, but most trees, most mature trees are a certain thickness at the bottom, and that thickness stays the same a long way, much further up the tree than you would expect. Similar to this branch here. You notice here it's this thick. Up here it's pretty well the same sort of thickness, and most trees are like that. If you get a tree, if you paint a tree and it goes too thin too quick, it doesn't look right, it's just wrong. So taking that on board, this tree should actually probably be about that sort of thickness. If it's this thickness here, it needs to be about that there and more here. That's the main sort of thrust of the tree going up there. And it will balance better. It will look more, well, tree-like, I guess. Best way to describe that one. Yeah, it's a tree. It's got to look tree-ish. It's got to have essence of tree, and it has to have strength. It's got to be strong. Okay, so I am reminded in what I'm about to say next. I can bang out a tree like this, no problem. Okay, now the reason I can do it is because I've spent a lot of my misspent youth in the woods, lurking around trees, all totally innocent. It's just that I was, particularly when I'd just left college, I was really into hyper detail, and I was fascinated by how things worked, and I also got this weird memory. I just remember things, and things like particularly images. So I have a library in my head of all these trees that I've seen, and I can just call them up. And I did not actually get into trouble, but I was teaching someone, was it last year or the year before now? I can't remember. Last year is a bit of a blur to a lot of people, I think. But it was a delightful guy and his wife. He was a retired dentist, and he came over from Germany. Anyway, I was teaching him, and I kept saying, you can do this, it's really easy. And he sort of stopped me in my tracks, and he said the reason you say that is because you know how to do it, so you're just remembering. He said if you don't remember how to do something, it's hard because you don't have that image in your head to fall back on. He's absolutely right. I've got to stop saying it. However, there is a part of me that wants to insist that actually it is easy. And I'm convinced that when someone is actually standing next to me and I'm talking to them, and I hope this has the same effect of you seeing this all happening live, I'm just going to zoom in there, that it has the same effect on you. That if you can see the way I use my hands and the way that I just basically go for it, you have to be, it's a fearless thing. I don't care if it doesn't go right, because this tree exists in my head. Nobody can ever find this tree and say, oh, you've done a bad painting of that tree because it doesn't look exactly like it. That doesn't matter at all. Even if you were painting this tree from a photograph and you were doing what I'm doing here, literally just this sort of speed, it's perfectly acceptable to be a highly detailed image of a tree. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, feel free to wave your arms in the air. I can just about see on the computer if I twist my neck around to the left here, it's how you approach something. Like here, let's just make sure you can see that. Over here, you see there's a complete lack of detail there. What you can see in that bit there that looks like detail is not. It's just brush marks. And in fact, even on a painting that has detail, I really hope this makes sense, it's all an illusion. All brush marks are an illusion on a painting of detail. So how many of you have been out into the woods and seen something like this and wondered where you would begin if you were going to, if you're going to paint something like this? Where would you start? You have to look at an object and see it differently. You've got to get the essence of the object and the character. Even I suppose I could say even the soul of the object. Just got to be able to pick it up and dissect it in your brain and simplify it. Let's have a little bit of something there. And this is where it gets really deep. Why am I putting a little bit of something just there? Well, because I can. That's the only reason. Because I like it there. I like the fact that you've got a dark area here and there's not enough contrast in it. It's dark and nothing else. So let's just tickle the paper on there until we get something that looks like the shape of the tree is changing. So I hope you understand what I'm at here. It's like if you relax into something, it's much easier than if you are tense. There is an exception to that though. If you point me in the direction of anything mathematical, it doesn't matter how much I relax, I still can't do it. But that's different. Okay, so this thing here, you see that line there, you don't, do I need to zoom back? You don't have to draw an entire object to show an object. There's this thing that a lot of artists try to do, and I'm going to try and do it over here in the sort of mid-distance. There's a distant hill over there with a few trees on the top of the hill, like so. Okay, so that disappears down there behind the tree. Don't worry about stopping when you hit the tree. You don't have to be precise. You can get precision later. You notice there, I've taken the paint up to the tree. Now if I want to bring the tree in front of that, all I've got to do is just add a little bit of light to the side of the tree there. And as you can see, it starts to sort of separate the two. Now, this bit of landscape here tells us that the distance from here to here is probably what, I don't know, 200 or 300 yards, something like that. I can make it look further away purely by simplifying that line, because as things move away, detail is lost, things are simplified. So by just smoothing that line, it gives us more distance. If I rough up the edge a little bit, or in fact, maybe what I'll do, I'll just try this. Notice, of course, I've only used one giant brush for all this incredible detail that you're seeing here. So back to what I was saying about brushes, you don't need to spend a lot of money. If I just put a few shapes here, I can put some trees that are closer to us than that distant bit of landscape. So it starts to give you a feeling of more space. And of course, when you're at this stage of the painting, if you say, well, I don't actually like those trees, I'm going to do this, that takes away the close trees and gives us other distant dark shapes further away. Just do that again. If I put a line below that shape, instantly it gets closer to us. Okay? So again, okay, I think I might have made a mistake, so I'm just going to take it off. You see how many chances you get? So that is another reason why you don't need to worry. There's absolutely no reason to try and be too precise about what you're doing. What I used to do, but I stopped. People would come here. In fact, it was 2019. I think 33 people came here through the year. Delightful bunch, really enjoyed it. Hard work, but it was nice meeting all those people. And they came from all over the world. It was fascinating stuff. Even New Zealand. I mean, some guy popped over from New Zealand. So I'm just going to darken something here, just a little bit there. What I would do is I'd start a painting. I would get to probably this stage, and then I would accidentally do what I did earlier with this shape here. I would destroy it accidentally, just by being a silly old idiot. And the reason I did it was to show people that you can't ruin it. This style of painting is the safest way of painting that I know. Just going to zoom back a little bit more. So the reason I stopped, there was a delightful lady, no names obviously, but I produced a painting. It wasn't an upright like this, it was actually landscape. This is portrait shape, but it was big landscape. And I swiped across it, not with a little brush, I swiped across it with one of these giant brushes like this, accidentally on purpose. And luckily I was there to support her because her legs went and I thought she was going to keel over. So I thought, well, I'd better be careful and not shock people too much. So back to this. Now I'll show you another little thing you can do. The only time I will use a small brush, I've just got to negotiate the room. I should have thought about this beforehand. I might.
Stuart, there was a question while you were talking from Evie about is this what you mean by perspective? And I think you were wiping some of the back.
Oh, perspective. Yeah, perspective. What's the question about? How?
Well, there was also a question just about. Let's see if I can find it here. It would be good to get tips on perspective is something that Pam had requested, but then Evie had asked, in the context of what you were saying a while back, what you mean by perspective.
Perspective.
Oh, I think she said you answered it.
Perspective is one of these things. Of all the questions I'm asked, one is, how do you paint clouds? How do you paint water? And how do you paint perspective? If this was a painting in full colour, which it will be one day, because this is just the underpainting really. Everything in the background, the further away it is, the more blue I will add to it, particularly pale blue. If you want to, in fact, my next video, I'm going to probably just do a general landscape, and I'll sort of cover perspective. But if this was a landscape and it was just disappearing, dead flat with just a few trees, in other words, there's the horizon, there's the sky up there, forget the tree, let's take the tree away. Everything where the land and the sky meet, all the colours fade down into a pale blue. And then they literally melt into the sky. Then the sky needs to become stronger at the top. So it's the same as the landscape. The landscape is dark in the foreground, getting lighter. The sky is lighter, getting darker. So I'm going to demonstrate this with a piece of paper. This is another way that I teach people. I'm just going to find a piece of paper. Right, here's a piece of paper. Okay, this is how you explain perspective in a painting. When people paint a picture, let's turn it the other way around, it's got some text on it. Hang on. There's a piece of paper. This is the landscape at the bottom here, this flat plane, and that, where the crease is, that's the horizon. When people paint a picture, the reason they don't get perspective is they make this one particular mistake. They paint the landscape and they paint the sky going straight up like that. What you have to do is paint the sky coming over your head like this. Does that make sense? So that when you're standing here looking at the horizon, the sky has to come over your head. You're looking into like a wedge shape, and it has to be darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. And the landscape is light and then dark, and that will give the feeling of perspective. Let me know if that makes sense. If not, I'll talk to you about it afterwards. When I finish painting, I'll try and explain it. But feel free to carry on asking questions. I'm just going to go across the room and get a particular brush. I have lots of very interesting brushes, but there is one here which is called a rigger. And the reason it's called a rigger, as in R-I-G-G-E-R, whoops, is it was used originally for painting the rigging of ships. If you want to paint a fine line, you don't use a very small stumpy brush. You use a brush that's thin and long. You need the length of the bristles to get a fine line. I'm going to get a little bit more liquid here. You have to have plenty of liquid to do what I'm just about to do. Okay, so there's my palette. As you can see, it's very sludgy. All I'm going to do is just get some paint on this brush here. These are really good for this sort of thing. Okay, so when you get a tree like this, you get this old gnarled tree, you quite often get I can't remember what they're called. Are they called suckers, where you get a young tree growing out from the base? Could be a sucker, not sure. I'm sure there's a name for it. But these brushes are great for that sort of thing. If you want to get a few fine lines in there, that's the brush for that. And you hold it like that, loose, so that it almost dangles. You don't want to do this, where it's rigid, because you'll get a rigid line. If you hold it like this and let it wobble and meander, you'll get an interesting line. Okay, so that's really good for masses of twigs. Please let me know if I get in the way too much, because
I just want to give you a heads up, Stuart, that it's almost the top of the hour.
My goodness. Doesn't time go quickly? It's incredible. You know, of course, the reason for that, the reason time goes quickly is because personally I'm enjoying it. I hope you are, but I find this really enjoyable, bearing in mind that my day normally, when I'm not painting, is spent designing books, and I designed lots and lots of paperbacks for a British publisher, sometimes 15 to 20 a month. So this is a complete contrast to sitting at a computer doing highly detailed, well, it's, basically text alignment and shifting. So anyway, there's a few lines that I just added with this brush. And so how far can I go in this painting now? So we've got an old tree. It's got a sort of patch here where the bark has dropped off. Much more interesting than if it was just a brown shape of a tree. For the texture of bark, that's another thing you can do, and then I'll stop in a second to show you something else. Okay, so just bark texture. So I'll choose, which bit shall I do it in? This area here, because it's sort of reasonably near the middle. Piece of paper again. If you take your piece of paper and you just go up and down a few times, crossing back and forth, I'm going to zoom right in on this. This is where I find out how good my camera is. Up and down, back and forth, like so. Okay, and let's just see how barky it looks. That's not bad. When you consider how quickly that's done, I suppose it's quite a reasonable technique. And again, also, I'm just going to, and then I'll stop. I'm just going to go up a little bit to here. Okay, so we've got this branch there, that one. And I want to give it the feeling of coming in front of us. One thing to avoid, if you're painting a tree, not all the branches, as you look at it, come out from the sides. Okay, some come out from this part and cross in front of the trunk. So what I want to do then here is give this the feeling that this branch doesn't actually just conveniently grow out the side of the painting, as you can see there. It actually starts to grow over here somewhere. So I'm going to just pull it across a little bit, and perhaps a little bit more there, a little bit extra. Oh no, if you want it a little bit more light in there, you know, you just rub harder, find a clean bit of paper there. Don't, whatever you do, don't keep using the dirty part of the paint. Find a clean bit of paper rather. If you dig it in with your fingernail, like that, you can get quite a light spot. And again, the eye loves contrast. If you don't have contrast, your picture will be dead. So I'm going to put a few more little bits in there. But follow the flow. You know, we all know that when you have a branch like this, I'll just move the camera just slightly. Okay. We all know when we look at trees how bark follows the contours of the tree. So you're going to get the odd bit here that turns the corner, like so. Think of it as visual poetry. You've got to sort of embellish everything. Just doing that just doesn't do it. It's got to have that thing. I don't know how you explain it. It's a certain movement in the way that you make your mark, and if you get it right, it shows in your painting. I really hope that makes sense. But there we go. A tree. I'm going to zoom back a bit instead. And down there, I think that's probably a good enough view. Yeah. So I hope this has helped. I'm just going to, instead of whipping down the bottom here, I'm just going to add a few of these as well. Don't forget, nature is incredibly untidy. And if you do this, as I said, let it dry. When it's completely dry, go over it with red and then wipe it away so that some red is left on, but the light areas have less red, and you'll be amazed at the effect that you'll get from that. And that's called glazing. And when this is dry, I'll be doing another lesson to show you how to do that. So I think now I'm going to probably stop and plonk myself down in front of the camera, and you can ask me anything you like. I think that's probably it for now.
Stuart, before you do that,
yep.
There were a couple of questions in the chat. So Paul was saying that he found that liquid dried too quickly. And he wondered if you were to remove your tree now, would it lump up?
No, it'll wipe off. I can show you if you like. I'll take the whole, I'll put a stripe right across it. How's that? Do you know I can't bring myself to do it? So what I'll do is I'll just show you here. If I just chop that branch there, you see what I mean? You'll end up with a tone, but it's not a bad thing to have a tone. But there's no sign of this drying. If I touch it, it's completely wet. So I'm just going to add that back, sort of. There we are. Yeah, it's incredibly wet, and I think it may be the same as Alkyd. This is 5 hours, allegedly 5 hours. It says it actually in English, 5 hours. This stuff Right, okay. There's not much English on this tin. It just says reduces brush stroke retention and resists yellowing. I like that. Semi-gloss finish, not suitable as a varnish. Well, that's okay. I wouldn't use it as a varnish. It doesn't say on here how long it takes to dry, so I'll find that out in the next few days, I guess. So that'll be interesting. As I said, never used it before. It has the same sort of feel as linseed oil. It smells like, I have a memory from when I was a kid in school, when I was in primary school. There was a particular glue they used to use, and that does smell a little bit like that. So there we are, there's a tree. And I'll sit down and answer questions. Flick the camera. Something I painted in my second Skype group lesson on the 28th of January this year. And it's bone dry, completely dry. It's mostly sap green with a bit of red ochre in it and a little bit of Payne's grey. And what I'm going to do today is add a glaze. And the glaze, it may have some yellow ochre in it, but I'm starting off with red ochre. This is alkyd and red ochre. And it's dead simple. What I'm going to do anyway is add a bit of colour to it. I'll be adding some blue or something for the sky. I may finish off some of the twigs, but the first thing I'm going to do is paint over it. Like that. Just chuck some colour on and see what happens. This is basic glazing. Now most glazing is done with oil. I'm using alkyd, as I said, and it's like applying a stain to a painting. But a nice stain, obviously. I'm just going to chuck the paint on. The beauty of this will be revealed in a few seconds. It doesn't matter how you put the colour on. The important thing is how you take the colour off. So if I just go down to there, in other words, the tree actually ends about here, then it runs into foliage. And you can see that the colour I'm putting on is quite transparent. I mean, red ochre is quite a transparent colour anyway. Most of the earth colours are. I could pile the paint on a little bit here, like so, and completely block out what's underneath. So anyway, checking. Right, I've closed the shutters. In France, we have shutters on windows, which is extremely useful. And there was a little bit of a reflection there, so it's gone now. So anyway, continuing. So you can put the paint on. It doesn't matter if it goes over the edge, really, because why would it? You can always wipe it and sort of change the thing as you go along, really. There we are. So let's put some red on my painting, and you may think, well, that's completely ruined that, but this is what this is for. I can start wiping away and leaving some of the red and taking some off. It's a bit very red at the moment, so we don't worry. I don't really want it quite that red. And the way that I can shift it a little bit more is to just add a little bit of liquid to the paper, like so, and put it on there, and it'll completely take off the paint. So I can go right back to the original and bring out some highlights. I'm going to take some off here because too much red on it will obscure some of the detail, and I don't really want to do that. So there we are. So the tree starts to get a sort of tree-like colour, although bear this in mind, trees aren't necessarily brown. The trunk of a tree can be all kinds of colours, and they're quite often grey, or with a sort of hint of a yellowy colour in there sometimes. They're all different. I think a lot of people are influenced by learning to paint in school when they're very young. And a teacher might say that, well, you know, your tree trunks need to be brown. They don't need to be brown. They could pink if you want. Who's to say tree trunk has to be brown? So there we are, we've got a bit of a stain of a colour. That brings a little bit of life to the actual trunk. You'll notice I'm taking off a lot more than I put on, but that's one of the beauties of it. And in fact, you need to do that, I think, because I don't want to swamp it with one particular colour. In fact, what I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to add, I think, a little bit of yellow ochre, just in the exposed wood. My idea with the painting was that there would be it's a damaged tree. It's obviously a very old tree and it's lost some of its bark. And that's this pale colour underneath. So I'm going to get a little bit of yellow in that. So here's a little bit of yellow ochre. You can use your hand if you want. This is a habit I have. I pick up a palette and I dab the paint like this. I probably shouldn't do that. I should probably just use a brush because I'm adding it as a glaze. So you don't have to get your hands covered in paint. That's the way I am at the moment. So I'll just wipe that off. Now I'm going to use the same brush, covered in brown paint, doesn't matter. As usual, no turpentine, just give it a wipe. Take off the main load of paint. Don't have to take it all off because I quite like the odd bit of colour showing through that shouldn't necessarily be there. It sort of adds to I think, the interesting look of the painting. If everything's too perfect, imagine if you're painting a sky up here and you had just flat blue and then just plain white billowing clouds. Wouldn't that be boring? And something else I do say often. I'm quite boring, really. Look at Turner, William Turner. Look at his skies. See what he did. He basically did what he wanted. He was a bit of a rebel, and the consequences of that are that he produced fascinating masterpieces, and nobody complains when he has a little bit of a overbleed of colour running into another colour. Okay, so I've got yellow ochre on the corner of the brush there. I'm just going to add a little bit in here. Again, no great attention to detail. All I'm doing is just touching it on there, like so, just to sort of get a little bit of depth to it. And again, back to the paper. It's a bit like that kung fu film, isn't it? I can't remember what it's called. But wax on, wax off. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. So, paint on, paint off. Careful how you take it off. Don't take too much off, otherwise there's no point in putting it on in the first place. So it's got a nice little bit of a richer colour to it. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to stick a little bit of blue in between these branches. You can't see the entire top of the picture because from about here up, I just sort of, because it was a demo, the branches just fade away to nothing. So I'm just going to sort of take away some of the white. Although I'm sort of hesitating because I quite like the white, but I think a little bit of blue probably won't be a bad thing. Now for the blue, I'm going to use royal blue and phthalo blue, and of course just as a reminder, I'm using liquid here, and I have gallons of it. Okay, nice big lump of liquid there, and a little bit of royal blue. Now royal blue, most of the blues are the same. They have very strong covering power. So when you put this on, you need to be ready to shift it around because it will become almost permanent very quickly. So let's just start in there. Let's just put in some blue. Not going right up to the edge of the tree, just in the general vicinity. Over the branches that I've got at the edge there, because it doesn't matter. I'll either leave them slightly covered, or I'll wipe the picture so that the twigs are revealed again. And I may actually add more twigs to this painting when this is dried off. And I'll show you that later. Okay, so there's some blue. Pretty flat and boring at the moment. And what I'll do, I'll just shove it in up there as well, just make sure you can see that. You can't, so I'll do it here instead. Okay, just a little bit of blue in there. And a little bit over here. Literally a stain. Because I'm adding this these glazes, it doesn't mean that this is finished, because when this is dry, when this glaze is dry, I can add another glaze over the top. So I could say, well, I've got a blue glaze, but then it's got a bit of red in it in a few places. So that'll be for when these are dry though. So I'm just going to shove that over there. Quite subtle over there, I think, because it's in the distance, and I quite like the sort of misty, mysterious look. And there we are. Right, so paper again. Okay, so let's just push the paint around a bit. In there, up to the edge of the branch, or trunk, whatever. The way I paint, I like to gradually build up layers, rather than just do one glaze in one go and say, right, that's it, it's finished. I like to do this and just put some colour on, and then wipe back, and then let that dry off, and then add something else to it. Now it could be that I may add the same blue again, but it gives me more control over the intensity of the blue. In other words, when I put blue on blue, it'll be bluer, and I'd rather do it like that than all in one sitting. The more you do this, the more that'll make sense. If you can finish a painting in one sitting, fine, all well and good. That's what I am used to. That's what I always had to do in my career, was to work fast, finish quickly, and move on to the next project, whatever it was. So yeah, speed was of the essence. Now, of course, I'm not working in what I used to do years ago, which was advertising and publicity and publishing. Everything was wanted yesterday. So now I can just take my time a bit, which I have to say I like. I do design a lot of books. I mean, I'm doing that most days. I sit at my computer and I format pages of books for an English publisher called John Hunt Publishing, which I've been doing for, I think, about 17 years now. And I really enjoy it, actually. I'm one of these people, I think, who will never actually retire. And I'm very happy designing books. I used to design covers, but quite frankly, they're more trouble to me than they're worth. I'm left to my own devices more when I'm designing pages. If you're designing covers, it's never quite as straightforward, because the author usually wants to change something, whereas the pages, there's a set design which I worked out years ago, and all I have to do is repeat it. And so that's what I'm not doing. So that's what I'm doing when I'm not painting, designing books. And I do around well, it could be up to 20 a month, which sounds like a lot of work, and sometimes it is, depending on the book. It's usually the sort of work you can do at your own pace, really. I've done it so long now, I can almost do it without thinking. Okay, so there we are. I'm not sure whether I'll put anything down on the grass here, frankly. I think it's sort of got it's got its own colour already. I suppose I could. No, I won't, not for the sake of it. I'm just going to do something with a little bit of white on this paper here. And sometimes you get a bit of wood that's sort of bleached. It's like from the sunlight. So I'm just going to bring out a highlight or two in there. Just a tiny amount of paint. You don't need much for this sort of thing. Just a touch every now and then. Just something, and also to enhance the shape there, so that it gives it a little bit more form. Yep, I like that. Where else should I do it? I think possibly a little touch there. Just literally a tiny amount, just the odd. You see what happens when you have something. If that area there looks a little bit bland, I mean it's okay. We've got the illusion of detail in there. However, just the odd little sparkle like that, where something is catching the light. After all, painting is about light. It's all about how you capture the light. A little something in there. And in fact, I'm going to do a little something over on the horizon here. You notice the sky is not so blue here, it's much more blue over that side. I can sort of change that, literally, just by taking away a little bit of paint, although I actually quite like that. So we've got a bit of clear sky, and then over here it goes a little bit misty, and we've got this sort of green stain at the back here, which to some people that may be a little off-putting. It isn't really to me. I quite like it. I'm a strange person like that. So if I just get some white on here, a nice big blob of white, I could just add really quickly the impression of some kind of cloud over there on that side. And in fact, this bit here, I could just add a little bit on the top of that, making sure that it disappears behind this branch and reappears the other side. If you have a white cloud and it just sort of comes to a stop there, that's going to look a little bit strange. So I'm just going to continue just in there, and you don't need a lot, just enough, just to show that it's going behind. And maybe it comes out over here somewhere, a little bit there. It all adds to the depth of the painting. I'll just pull that cloud across there a bit. I think that'll do. Now we've got this sort of branch-like thing going through there. The cloud obviously can't come in front of that. So again, this is where the sort of glazing technique comes into the fore. And if I just make this into a little point, same stuff that I do for lots of things. Paper is a very good tool, for painting, because you can make any brush you like. You don't have to rely on a brush, although I do use brushes obviously, but I can make a specific brush now that will just fit the width of that branch there, and I'm just going to push through there, and there we are. The branch is now in front of the cloud, which is of course where it should be. There we go. Now, same thing happening there. Just see it, yes. So I'm going to just find where these twigs go. It's probably something like that there. There we are, and it comes back, and it's in front of the cloud. Similar thing happened there. No, it didn't. Now, what happened there was I actually, as I painted this twig coming down here, I sort of ran out of paint there, and then there's nothing, and then it continues there. So I might fix that in a minute. The other thing I'm going to do, just to finish off the painting, I'm going to use my rigger brush in a minute, and I'm going to put lots of little twigs up here, just to sort of make it a bit more interesting. I think it's under-twigged. And we can't have an under-twigged tree, can we? So there we are. Got some nice colours through the tree. Just going to do a little fleck or two down here. Don't want it to look too much like bird droppings, but there you go. There's an interesting subject for a painting. Tree with bird droppings. Don't think we're going there. Okay, there we go. Right, so there we are. Happy with that. And so now I'm going to get my rigger and some darker paint. It's basically going to be sap green. I don't know whether to add. I think I will. Yeah, I'm going to add some Payne's grey to that. So, okay, Payne's grey. All my paints that I use are made by, well, they're not made by them, they sell them. I think it's made in China, probably. Who knows? Yes, it's made in China, but the company that supplies the tube, I guess, is Le Frankenbourgeois. Very good paint. Good colour strengths. And the reason I buy it mostly is because of the fact that the sap green is so strong. You don't want a weak sap green. Trust me on that. Okay, so Payne's grey, more liquid. You may think I've got a lot of liquid here and I'm being wasteful. I'm not, actually. I've got so many paintings on the go, I can use that in a few moments. When I've got this painting out the way, I'll be working on another one, ready for my next video. Okay, so we've got a nice dark colour here on my rigger. And I'm just going to add some Twiggery. Now, here's a few little tricks for you. What you don't want to do is to sort of settle your hand and start with a twig up here, working down to the branch, and you also don't want to, oh no, I'm going to contradict myself. There's two things you don't want to do. One is to start the twig up here and finish up on the branch. The other one is don't start here and work up there. Okay, now that may sound silly. The best way I've found to do this is like this. Don't start in any particular place. Start in the middle of the twig if you want, but just start somewhere. So if I just do a few shapes like that, can you in fact see it? I hope you can. I might let's zoom in a little bit. See if we can zoom. Okay. Right, so we're over here. So I did this shape here. So what I'm going to do now I've got that is pause. Then I'm going to find out where I want to aim for. So I'm going to aim for down here. Now I've got fresh paint. So as the twig was running out of paint, or brush was running out of paint actually, I can then get some more colour, take my time, figure out where my target is and take the twig to it. Now that I know it's going to go there, I can just go to the end of that and strengthen it a little bit where it joins the tree. And you'll get a much better flow and a more professional look in your Twiggery. So underneath here, I want to do something that way. So I'm going to start there this time and just do a shape, like so. Then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to think, now, where's that going to go? I think it should go across that cloud. So I've got more paint on the brush. Just check you can see where I'm going in the viewfinder. Yep. So there I've got more paint. I can put a lump and then a drag and then do that. Now when you look at twigs, you get that. You get changes of angle. When you get a change of angle, it's actually much more, I don't know what the word is, it's more natural, I suppose, if you can have a little dark spot just to emphasize that change of angle. So now I know that I've got it there, another bit of dark, a little bit more strength, and then just let it fade away. So the twig now comes down here, up there, and off that way. I'm going to use this point to add another joint to the twig. So I'm using my little finger here on the board to support my hand a little bit, and I've also got my other hand behind the board. I don't know why I do that, because it's not going up. It's fixed on a very good easel, and I'm just going to touch it and drag quickly like that. So you keep these little twigs fresh. You don't want to start, well, no, I shouldn't say that. There are ways of doing things, but for me anyway, the way I find is better is to keep it fresh. In other words, touch it and do something and then stop and then leave it, because that's got a clean, just thrown on sort of look to it. I've got a little stumpy thing there on the side of the tree there. That is just, to me, screaming out for something from up here to come down and join with it, like so. See how fresh it looks? I hope you are, anyway. So I'm going to move the camera. Now I've gone to this area of the picture because I think it's a little bit bland in there. It needs a little bit more. So I'm going to put some twigs in here, and maybe a twig or two coming off that way and this way. And I'm going to go and do these as quickly as I can because I want this to be a reasonably quick video. I've got this branch here. This is the one I showed you earlier where I've got a dark bit and then it disappears and then it continues. So I want to sort of, I want to just put a little bit more in there, just a touch, as quickly as I can. Finish off with a little node, like so, and then follow that down and strengthen it as it hits the actual tree. That's good. It gives it a little bit more strength. Because obviously the thing about trees is that they're quite, particularly a tree like this, they're quite strong, and you want to give that feeling of strength. Here I've got it's gone a little bit sort of airy-fairy in there, so I want to sort of do something with that. So I'm just going to add a few dark spots, like so, just to give it a little bit more presence, I suppose. Okay, now again, sleeve up. Let's put in a few more quick twigs. So I know that I'm going to have something from here going up there. So I'm going to start up there and work down to it. The advantage is also that your arm, this is one of my theories, your arm, when you're doing stuff like this, works better with the help of gravity. Because I know I'm going to end up down there. If I'm doing this, I'm going the opposite way. It's like drawing the inside of a circle almost, which is always harder than the outside. So I'm just going to sort of pull something down here, like so, and then into the tree. Okay, good. I don't usually do the sound effects of the sound, but there you go. Right, so where it joins the tree, I want to make it look as though it's actually coming in front of the tree a little bit, because not all branches shoot off the side of a tree. Some of them actually originate on this side of the tree. You see what I mean? It's a great temptation for people to have all the branches coming out the side, like it's flat, but they don't. They come from this area as well, from the front. So to get that a little bit better, a little bit stronger, I'm just going to strengthen up the colour, pull it down here in front of everything else, and then I might even be working on that another time, or maybe in a few minutes, possibly, just to make sure that people are seeing that as it coming from the front, not the side. Okay, hope that makes sense. Right, over here, a few more twigs. Let's have one. They don't all have to go up, by the way. You know, you do sometimes on trees, they go off sideways, like so. Yeah, don't be too predictable. Allow for the fact that when trees are growing, they take the route of least resistance. So whatever they're doing, they're trying to put leaves out where there's going to be sunshine, so they're going to go in all different directions. So a little lesson in Twiggery. I think everyone should be taught a certain amount of Twiggery. Okay, so let's see now. Well, in fact, I might add. Will I? A little bit of red to the ochre, the Payne's grey. Well, okay, so let's see, what should we do here? Let's just do something with this edge, just there. I think a few bumps and nodules down there. It all sort of, you can keep doing this and adding to it and adding to it. And the end result will be, people will look at it and say, wow, the detail in your tree is just unbelievable. And it's not, it's just an illusion. And it's not all done in one go. It's done in several sittings if you want. Okay. So there's some... and of course, once you've done the twigs, you could then add a few leaves if you want. And, I don't usually bother. I quite like the sort of starkness that you get from this sort of style of painting. It's just one of those things that yanks a chain. Or maybe that's not the right word. If it yanks a chain, it annoys you. It doesn't annoy me at all. Okay, so that bend there to me is sticking out like a sore thumb, and I think it needs something coming off. Right, well I think that's it. It's not a long video, although I usually find after I've made these videos, I get them on my editor and I look at them and I think, wow, that's going on for a long time. But that's what it looks like. I'm going to move the camera again so that you can see the bottom of the picture as well. So many things to release on this tripod. Okay, so there's the bottom. Just I didn't really do anything to that today. In fact, I did nothing. And a few twigs. There's even a bit of sky up there that I missed out, but I can do that any time. So there we are. That's a little quickie on glazing and also finishing off the tree that I did for my Skype lesson a few weeks ago. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this as usual. If you want to come to any of my Skype lessons, the info will be in the box below. And there we go. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.